People in the quiet town of Hollow Creek always avoided the decaying house on Maple Street, the one with boarded up windows and vines curling like fingers across its roof. Locals whispered that the ghost of a little girl haunted it, a girl who vanished decades ago under circumstances no one dared to explain. I wasn't raised there, so the fear didn't stick to me the same way. And as a writer desperate for something real, I chose a stormy night to push open the rotting gate and step toward that house with a flashlight and a notepad. The rain poured like a warning, and the moment I crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind me, echoing like a scream, and I felt the temperature drop. Not gradually, but all at once, like the house was breathing me in. The silence inside was unnatural, so complete that even my heartbeat seemed out of place, until a small, delicate voice whispered from somewhere in the shadows, "Come play with me." So faint and melodic, it sounded like it belonged in a broken lullaby. I followed it, drawn down narrow hallways where wallpaper peeled like shedding skin, until I reached a room no bigger than a closet, where a small dollhouse rested on a table beneath a flickering bulb. It looked identical to the house I was standing in. Every floorboard, every crack, perfectly miniaturized. And I leaned closer, realizing that the dolls inside mirrored real people. One of them looked like me, and one was missing entirely. As I stared, the dollhouse started glowing from the inside with a pale, unnatural light, and I heard the voice again. Closer, clearer, right behind me this time, followed by cold fingers brushing against my neck. I turned, but the room was empty, the air thick with rot and perfume, and suddenly, the dollhouse shifted. A new room appeared within it, one that hadn't existed before, a trapdoor hidden in the back corner. I found the real version of that passage and crawled through, emerging into a secret space where dust-covered toys sat in a circle around a small skeleton and a child's journal filled with crude drawings of her parents standing over her with knives. They tried to silence her spirit, trap it in that house forever. But something had gone wrong. And now she wasn't just in the house anymore. I ran through the rain, escaped, or so I thought, until last night when I found a replica dollhouse waiting in my apartment, placed carefully on my desk, complete with a glowing red window and a doll that looked exactly like me, except its eyes were black and bleeding. In a remote, windswept coastal town where the fog rolled in like a living thing, there stood an old, forgotten lighthouse that had been left to rot by time and silence. Locals refused to go near it after sunset, whispering about the keeper who had vanished one night during a storm and whose lantern still glowed when no one was there to light it. Sarah, a young historian obsessed with uncovering lost stories, couldn't resist the mystery. She waited for a stormy night, armed with a flashlight and a stubborn heart, and made her way through the rain-slicked cliffs toward the structure, its silhouette looming like a forgotten giant. As she pushed the rusted door open, a gust of cold, salty air slapped her face. The floorboards groaned beneath her boots, and the scent of mildew clung to the air like decay. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, circles within circles, slashes like tally marks, and names etched over and over again. The silence inside wasn't just quiet, it was suffocating, unnatural, broken only by the sudden wail of an old foghorn that hadn't worked in decades. The sound echoed through her bones. Drawn toward it, Sarah climbed the spiral staircase, each step moaning under her weight, the wind howling through broken windows. At the top, in the keeper's room, stood the foghorn, covered in rust and ash, but beside it was a single burning candle. And next to the flame stood a man, pale, translucent, unmoving. His eyes were black pits, and his skin seemed stretched too tightly over his skull. Sarah froze as the ghostly figure turned to her, reaching out with trembling fingers, whispering through cracked lips, "Leave now." She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, as the room seemed to close in. Then behind her, she felt it, ice-cold fingers brushing her neck. The keeper was no longer in front of her. He was behind her. "While you still can," he breathed, his voice now angry, deeper, layered with something inhuman. She screamed and ran, tripping down the stairs, nearly breaking her leg, her flashlight flickering violently. She didn't stop until she burst through the door into the rain again. But even now, back in her warm apartment, years later, when the sky grows dark and the wind blows just right, she still feels that cold hand resting on her shoulder, reminding her she never left alone. Every night at exactly 3 a.m., Liam saw him, the same figure, always there, standing beneath the flickering streetlight right across the road from his bedroom window. A tall man in a black suit, face partially hidden by shadows, arms stiff by his sides. He didn't move, he didn't blink. He just watched. The first night, Liam had brushed it off. Maybe it was just some insomniac neighbor out for a weird late-night stroll. The second night, he felt a chill, but still convinced himself it was nothing. But by the fifth night, the man hadn't left. He hadn't moved a muscle. Always in the same spot. Always staring. Weeks passed, and Liam's sleep withered away. He tried keeping his curtains closed, but the feeling didn't go. It was like the man could see through the fabric, through the walls, right into Liam's mind. The pressure of being watched settled like a stone on his chest. Even during the day, he felt uneasy, paranoid, hunted. One night, exhausted and angry, Liam snapped. He grabbed the old baseball bat from his closet and stormed out the front door, bare feet slapping against the cold pavement. The street was deathly silent. "Who the hell are you?" he yelled, eyes locked on the man across the street. No answer, no movement. The man just stared. Liam inched closer, pulse thudding in his ears. The air was still. The only sound was the quiet hum of the street lamp above. But then, in a single blink, the man vanished. A freezing ripple passed down Liam's spine. He turned slowly back toward his house and froze. The man was inside now, standing behind Liam's bedroom window. Not outside it, inside, facing the street, staring out at him. Panic hit like a punch. Liam's mouth went dry. That was impossible. The doors were locked. The alarm was set. He hadn't even taken his eyes off the man long enough for him to... His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from an unknown number lit up the screen. "You let me in." The porch light above him flickered twice, then went out. A slow creak echoed behind him. The front door. It was opening on its own. He ran, or tried to, but something cold and invisible wrapped around his legs, dragging him backward toward the house. He clawed at the sidewalk, screaming, but the street swallowed his cries. No one heard. No one came. The next morning, Liam's front door stood ajar. His bed was unmade, as if someone had just gotten up. His phone was found on the floor, screen cracked, blinking with a single unread message. But Liam was gone. Not a trace. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. Now, every night at 3 a.m., neighbors say they see a shadow standing behind Liam's bedroom window. Tall, silent, watching, waiting. In a remote, foggy village, there was an old, abandoned farmhouse that had been empty for decades. Locals whispered that the farmhouse was haunted by the ghost of a farmer who had mysteriously disappeared years ago. Some believed the house was cursed, others claimed it was a resting place for restless spirits. The wind often howled through the village, carrying with it tales of the vanished farmer, and people avoided the farmhouse at all costs. No one dared to enter, but curiosity got the better of Sarah, a young journalist determined to uncover the truth. One moonless night, Sarah decided to visit the farmhouse. The village was shrouded in an eerie fog that stretched for miles, swallowing the night and casting a veil of mystery over the land. The air was thick with mist as she approached the dilapidated building. Her flashlight cut through the darkness like a blade, revealing broken windows and decaying wood. The heavy wooden door creaked open, its hinges protesting the intrusion. The smell of dampness and age filled her nostrils as she stepped inside, feeling a chill in the air that seemed to sink into her bones. As she moved cautiously through the dimly lit rooms, Sarah noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols and drawings that looked like they were made in haste, as if someone had been trying to communicate a warning. The silence was unnerving, oppressive. It pressed in around her like a living thing, suffocating the air with its weight. Suddenly, a soft, raspy voice broke the silence. "Don't go down there." The voice was hauntingly familiar, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. It was as if she had heard it before, somewhere distant, but she couldn't place it. She stopped in her tracks, heart pounding. "Who's there?" she called out, but no reply came, only the sound of the wind outside howling through the cracks of the old house. Following the voice, Sarah made her way down a narrow, dimly lit hallway. There, at the end, she saw a small, dusty room. In the center of the room stood a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness below. The air grew colder as she descended the steps, the atmosphere growing heavier with each creak of the old wood beneath her feet. The temperature seemed to drop, and she could see her breath puffing out in front of her like fog. At the bottom of the staircase, Sarah found herself in a small, damp room. The only source of light was a single, flickering candle resting on the floor, its weak flame struggling against the oppressive darkness. As she looked around, she saw it, the ghostly figure of an old farmer standing in the far corner of the room. His clothes were ragged, and his face was pale, his eyes hollow and empty. He reached out to Sarah with a skeletal hand, the coldness of it sending a jolt of terror through her. "Leave now," the farmer whispered, his voice like a dry wind blowing through the trees. Sarah's heart raced, her body felt frozen, as if her legs were unwilling to move. The cold hand of fear gripped her shoulder, and she could feel the presence of the ghostly figure pressing in on her. His voice grew louder, insistent. "Leave now, while you still can." Panic surged through her veins as Sarah turned and fled, stumbling through the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. Her flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. She finally found a hidden passage, leading her out of the farmhouse and back into the night. But even as she stumbled into the fog, the cold hand remained on her shoulder, as if the farmer was still with her. Days passed, but the sense of dread never left Sarah. Even now, when she walks through quiet places, she can still feel the icy fingers of the farmer's touch, a reminder that some spirits never truly leave. She knows that she was never meant to enter that farmhouse, and that the ghostly presence will always watch her, waiting to claim her soul when the time is right. In a small, forgotten town, nestled away from the bustling world, stood an abandoned mansion. The place had been empty for decades, but its reputation was alive and well. The locals whispered about it in hushed tones, speaking of a ghostly presence that haunted its walls, a woman who had vanished mysteriously years ago. Her name was lost to time, but her spirit was said to still linger, trapped in the place where her life had once unraveled. No one dared to enter the mansion, not even the bravest souls. The place was cursed, they said, but curiosity, that nagging thing that tugged at the heart of the boldest and the foolish, led Emily to it. She was a young writer, determined to uncover the truth behind the rumors. The old stories fascinated her. How could anyone resist the allure of the unknown, especially when it promised to feed the hunger of her pen? One stormy night, she made up her mind. Emily, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a sense of adventure, made her way toward the mansion. The rain poured heavily, slapping against the ground as she trudged through the wet mud. The wind howled, but Emily pressed on, determined to prove the legends wrong. As she reached the mansion, the overgrown ivy seemed to claw at the building, and the crumbling stone facade gave the place an ominous air. The door, old and worn, creaked as it opened, revealing the blackness within. She stepped inside, and the cold immediately hit her like a slap. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was so heavy it seemed to press in on her. Every floorboard beneath her feet groaned under her weight, echoing through the empty halls. Her flashlight flickered and danced in the darkness, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. As she made her way deeper into the house, Emily noticed strange markings on the walls, symbols she didn't recognize, as though someone had been desperately trying to communicate something. But what? Her heart raced. She wanted to turn back, but the allure of the mystery kept her going. That's when she heard it. A voice, soft and melodic, barely a whisper. "Don't look into the mirror." The voice sent a cold shiver up her spine. It wasn't a warning. It was a command. But there was something comforting in its tone, as though whoever was speaking was trying to protect her. Emily's instincts screamed at her to leave, but her feet moved forward, drawn to the source of the voice. At the end of a narrow hallway, she found a small room, and in the center of it stood an old, ornate mirror. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, as though it had been forgotten for years. Her breath caught in her throat as she slowly approached it. She wiped away the dust, revealing the glass beneath, and that's when she saw it. Her reflection? Well, it was her, but not entirely. Her eyes were wide with fear, her face pale, but there was something more. The reflection seemed off, as if it was shifting, changing in subtle ways. And then it happened. The mirror began to glow. A faint, eerie light emanated from the surface, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Emily's breath became visible, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She turned around, half expecting to find someone standing behind her, but there was nothing. The room was empty, yet her reflection had changed. Behind her, in the glass, stood a woman, pale, her eyes hollow and dark, her face a twisted mask of sorrow and anger. The woman reached out toward her, her fingers impossibly cold, as if the very touch of her would freeze Emily's soul. "Leave now," the ghostly figure whispered. The words were like ice in Emily's veins. She tried to turn, but her body was frozen, unable to move. The chill from the reflection seeped into her bones, and the woman's voice grew louder, more insistent, more desperate. "Leave now, while you still can." The air around Emily thickened, pressing in on her, and she could feel a presence at her back, a cold hand resting on her shoulder. Her pulse hammered in her chest as panic surged through her. She had to get out. She had to escape. In a blind rush of terror, she stumbled backward, her hands scraping against the walls as she ran through the darkness. Her breath was ragged, and every step felt like it would be her last. She didn't stop until she found a hidden passageway behind a faded tapestry. The passage was narrow and winding, but it led her outside. The rain was still coming down in torrents, but she didn't care. She ran, her heart pounding so loudly in her ears that she could barely hear anything else. As she looked back toward the mansion, the front door creaked open behind her. A cold gust of wind swept past, carrying with it the faint sound of the woman's whisper. Even now, as Emily tries to move on with her life, the feeling of that cold hand on her shoulder never leaves her. Late at night, she can still hear the whisper, calling to her, reminding her that some can never be outrun.